So we talk a lot about the doom loop as the work from home has taken effect and companies no longer require their employees to be in the office. Maybe it's 3 days a week. Well, that's still 40% of your work week is working from home, right? Don't need all this office space. So what about these companies, these big companies that have taken down these enormous spaces with long-term 20-year leases, 10-year leases? What are they doing? Well, if you're Facebook, you're stroking a check for $181 million to give back office space it can't fill. Let's get into it. This is one of the biggest write a check events that most folks in commercial have ever seen. Here we go. Meta is paying out. Meta. It's Facebook. Let's call it Facebook because Meta what? The metaverse? That's all said and done, isn't it? That's just old hat. Along with people leaving Twitter. I'm never going back to Twitter. Because of the hate speech on Twitter, I'm leaving forever. Now you don't hear anything about that. It's X, formerly known as Twitter, and a guy said this about his rival. So ridiculous. We just cruised right past that whole thing about everybody leaving Twitter. They're all there. Let's get back to Facebook. I mean, Meta. In the return to office battle, it seems Meta may have accepted a heavy financial defeat after it surrendered one of its key locations for a 9-figure sum. Facebook's parent company has ended its lease on a central London location 18 years earlier than expected. 18 years earlier. Is that a 25-year lease? Giving notice to landlord's British land, it would be vacating the 8-story building at 1 Triton Square. Now you might say, well, why don't they just keep it, Sean, and do some bowling in there and take out all the furniture and throw a big party? Well, they don't want to pay for insurance. They don't want to have the liability. They don't want to pay for utilities. They don't want to pay for all that stuff. So that's further drag on top of the, whatever it is in rent they're paying out. So the 8-story building at 1 Triton Square. However, surrendering the space comes at a cost, an eye-watering £149 million or $181 million, the equivalent of 7 years of rent. So that's their payout. All right. You guys are going to ditch on the lease. Here's what you got to pay. Now I've ditched out on leases before, but what that typically means is if you're legit and you're following your lease, then you got to keep paying for that. And by ditch out, I mean, vacate it before the lease is over. You still got to pay on it. And then you get the landlord or whomever to try and rent it out. And sometimes it'll take 6, 7, 8 months, maybe a year to rent the space out. Cause sometimes commercial, depending on what the market is, you just got to wait till that bad boy rents out. And, I've done that, but I didn't pay the equivalent of a 7 years rent, but that's because my lease was, maybe I had another year on the lease, something like that. Yeah. 181 million. I did not write a check for 181 million. Meta, like many other big tech names, has been pushing its staff back to 3 days a week in office. Those who don't comply could either risk being fired or see the issue brought up in performance reviews. I see that you didn't scan your name tag into the complex more than 3 times on average in 2022. Should we talk about that? I mean, where were you those other 2 days? Now they're just trying to get folks to come back 3 days a week. That's why you've got such a large amount of space out there. Like the financial district in San Francisco talked about that time and time and time again. One of the stories that I passed on, but I thought it was interesting to mention, was Banana Republic, owned by the Gap. The Gap has had massive issues, bankruptcy, all kinds of restructuring, you name it. But Banana Republic in the financial district in Embarcadero 1 or 2 Embarcadero is the address in the financial district. The Banana Republic gave up that store Meanwhile, they're opening one up basically in the Tenderloin in Union Square, which is kind of where the Westfield Mall is, that whole shopping section. So to me, what that indicated was, number one, they're already doing a massive restructuring. They're shutting down a whole bunch of stores. But because the financial district in San Francisco has been so vacant. There's just nothing going on there. You go there in the middle of the day and you'll see video after video of, closed, vacant, space available, and just nothing going on because you don't have all these businesses anymore that need all this space because they're not in the downtown core working. They're working remotely and they might be coming in a couple of days a week. But that means enormous swaths of that formerly occupied commercial district are now vacant. And that's literally what we're talking about here. Facebook doesn't need this space. And let's be honest, during the whole pandemic, all these companies, everything online just exploded, right? Interest rates were super low. Hey, let's take on a bunch of debt because this is some virtually free debt. Let's expand. Well, now we're pulling back, right? Pulling back. Tech is, had some issues and we're pulling back and trying to get people back in the office. Amazon struggling to get people back in the office 3 days a week. Big companies. How about Zoom requiring their employees? I don't know what faction of Zoom it was, but if you're at Zoom and you're required to come back to the office, Zoom is the tool that a lot of folks used. It's how you do your online meetings, right? You work at Zoom and you got to go into the office. That to me is like, don't use our product. You need to come in. It's like, what are we doing here, folks? Well, we need to have that face-to-face interaction. We need to have that ability to see the whites of your eyes and get that collaborative effort going, right? All that corporate nonsense. Now there is, and I talk to people, there is something to be said for the water cooler talk. For that, if you're in a super creative industry, just talking to other people, just if you're young and you're learning, you need to be in the office. That's where you're going to learn stuff. That's how we all learn stuff, right? I learned stuff sitting at my Uncle Gary's desk. I just did. I'd go up there after work, see what he's doing, see what phone calls he's making. All right, this is what that guy's doing. And you put that in your head and you're like, okay, so that guy's successful. I'm going to follow what that guy did. And if you're working at home, all right, yeah, I guess I'm going to play some more Grand Theft Auto. Here we go. I'm going to play some Doom, and you're not getting that experience, right? So there is a lot to be said about going into the office, but I think, the whole pandemic thing just kind of rocked this all. And that's what Facebook is saying. However, the fact the Instagram owner is shutting one of its 4 major London locations could suggest the reduction from a pre-pandemic 5-day in-office norm is too much of a change to justify the overheads. That's what's going on, right? This is costing too much. Let's cut a check because we can get out for less than the cost of the full lease. We don't have all those other expenses that we talked about. We're just going to do this. We're just going to cut ties, boom, move on. And, 81 million for Facebook or Meta or whatever the damn name is now. That's a drop in the bucket. It's going to impact earnings by a tiny little scooch, right? Nobody cares. 181 million. Company capitalized at how many billion? I don't even know. Another reason could be that Meta doesn't have the same number of staff it once did in order to fill the offices. Okay. All right. Yes, there's that. Or staff is no longer coming into the office. That to me is the big kicker. And that's why in these downtown cores, you're seeing office space vacant all day long. Now, where that isn't a thing is in the burbs. It's in the burbs, right? Where everybody's already living. Want to be able to be close to home. All right. I commute my morning commute in the morning. I'm an outlier, right? Because I just do this weird thing where I come into this room and podcast. My commute is 6 minutes because that's what I want to do. Could I live in a massive home out in the country? Absolutely. I don't want to battle traffic. I want to have a 6-minute commute. On a bad day, I want to be able to walk to the office. It takes me about 25 minutes. So during the pandemic, 25 minutes. Is that how long it took last? I don't remember. It's a couple of miles. Mile and a half, 2 miles, something like that. During the pandemic, the company was among those who had a hiring spree. Interest rates are down and everybody was doing stuff online, right? Just this massive push online. But as online activity began to slow as COVID dissipated, CEO Mark Zuckerberg announced mass layoffs. You see a lot of those guys on those electric surfboards is what I call them. You know, they're going around. Remember when Zuckerberg was holding the flag and he was riding the electric surfboard and he just had this look on his face where he's like, oh, God bless America, I think. Zuckerberg. In March, Facebook founder Zuckerberg announced plans to lay off 10,000 workers across the business following a previous announcement in November that 11,000 jobs would be axed. These big companies, I can't remember what company it was, but it was like, all right, they lost 15, they've just fired 15,000 people. Well, how many did they have total? It was like Amazon, I think maybe. And it was like 300,000. And you're like, so when we read 10,000 workers, oh my word, oh my gosh, it's a tiny fraction of these companies, right? Yeah, some divisions got laid off. Some things don't work. Some things do work. Changes are made. Space is no longer needed. However, for employees still left standing at the company, which also owns WhatsApp, there are luckily other London locations where they can secure a desk. They don't need this space anymore. They're going to stroke that check and they're going to move on. Meta still has 3 cities in the English capital, including its 400,000 square foot office at King's Cross, which opened early last year. The state-of-the-art development spans 2 connected buildings, boasts a 4,000 square foot rooftop garden, which you have to have. I mean, if you're Meta, you got to have that. It's one of the lowest embodied carbon buildings in the development. Oh, that means so much to me. Could care less, right? This whole thing. I was watching George Carlin, a short of George Carlin the other day, and he was going on and on and on about all these things that the earth has experienced over the last billions of years. And as human mankind, we've been around, he said 100,000 years. Okay, go down that evolution. If you're a Christian, you're like, oh, it's like 4,000 years. Whatever it is. Yeah, the relative ratio of Earth to mankind is so skewed. And George Carlin's like, yep, and we're going to rock the whole ecosystem of the world with some tin cans and plastic bottles. George Carlin is great. That guy was. He's just so, he just railed on the whole global warming thing. Just like, boom, off it goes, right? So the lowest embodied carbon building in the development. All right, whatever. The business also recently took on all floors at its office building in Brock Street near Euston train station. Here in the Pacific Northwest, and well, we go on to say a bunch of other stuff here, but what I'm going to talk about is Facebook has multiple buildings, literally within a walking distance of where I'm sitting. 124th on 10 blocks. So call it 12 blocks. So a mile and a half up the street. I mean, it's not far. Facebook was going to take down several of these complexes known in the Spring District. I think they even bought a building, but they no longer need that space. So they've dipped out of that. And that's part of their whole restructuring where they've got people working at home and they no longer need the office space. And if people are not working at home, they're maybe working in the office 3 days a week. So you've got XYZ percentage of office space they no longer need. So Facebook is not only giving back space in London, they're giving back space here in Bellevue. And it's because at the time it seemed like a great idea. Hey, we're going gangbusters, need all this space. And then boom, pandemic hit. Whoa, we're going to have to all work from home. You guys can do it. We can all do it. We can band together. We can do 15 days to flatten the curve. Becomes 2 years, rocks the entire commercial real estate world. That's literally what we've said has happened and is happening. And this is one of those pieces. Well, what about all that space out there that's not being occupied anymore? Meta's handing it back. There you go, along with your big $181 million check. Crazy times. but that's what's going on. All right. If you want to get more of news for reasonable people, if you want to see what the private channel looks like, we are doing, and we'll have a link in the description. We will have a 1 month free introductory offer where you can just take advantage of that. See what we've got. We've got a ton of videos in there because we're releasing 2 a week. And that's ReasonableTV.com. That's our paid subscription site. You're going to have content there that, although it might seem like, why is this here? There's reasons for why there's content there versus other places, because, stuff is happening in the online world, and we got to be careful. And so that's kind of one of the ways that we do it. Plus, it's a way that you can support this channel. If you just can't, if you just know that there's more stuff out there and you got to see it, ReasonableTV.com. Give it a whirl for free for a month. See if it's something you like. And then if you don't, just cancel it. That's what we're doing. Thanks again for being here. We'll catch up soon on the next one. Bye for now.